Before Japan, there was no Japan, no islands, nothing solid. The Kojiki says the land was still young then, floating like oil, drifting like a jellyfish on the water. Two gods stood on a bridge in the sky. They lowered a spear into the water, and they stirred it, and they lifted it out. Where the brine dripped off the point of that spear, it stacked up and set and became land. They walked down onto it, they built a house on it, they were married on it, and they set out to give birth to a country. Their first child came out wrong, and they put it in a boat and pushed it out to sea. Their last child came out as fire, and it killed her. This is the first story in the oldest book Japan still has, before the sun goddess, before the storm god, before any of it. This is how the islands were made, and what it cost. This retelling is based directly on the Kojiki, Japan's oldest chronicle, compiled in the year 712, with some moments dramatized for a modern audience. I am a Japanese storyteller, and I return to the Japanese sources to bring their words and their world into English. The Kojiki opens in the high plane of heaven, where the first gods came into being one after another, and then hid themselves away. 7 generations passed. The 7th generation was 2 of them, Izanagi and Izanami. Their names are usually read as the same word, to invite, with a male ending and a female ending. The elder gods gave them an order, and it was not a poetic one. The world below was unfinished, drifting, the Kojiki says, like a jellyfish. Go down, make that drifting thing firm, and finish it. And they were handed a spear hung with jewels. They walked out onto the floating bridge of heaven and looked down at the water. They pushed the spear in, and they stirred. And the Kojiki keeps the sound of it. Koro koro. The noise a thing makes when it starts to thicken while you turn it. They drew the point clear of the surface. Brine ran down the shaft and fell back into the sea. And the drops did not sink. They stacked. They held. They set. The first ground in the world was called Onogoro, the island that curdled by itself. The Kojiki does not say how big it was. Nobody knows which rock it was. There is one off Awaji that people have been pointing at for centuries. You can walk it in an afternoon. They came down onto it. On that island, they raised a pillar, a heavenly pillar, and around the pillar they built a hall. And then they had the strangest conversation in Japanese mythology, and the Kojiki writes it down without any embarrassment at all. "How is your body made?" he asked her. "My body is formed," she said. "But there is one place on it that did not finish forming." "My body is formed," he said, "and there is one place on it that formed too much. I would like to join the part of me that is too much to the place in you that is not finished, and give birth to the land. How would that be?" "That," she said, "would be good." So they agreed how it would be done. He would go around the pillar to the left. She would go around it to the right. And where they met on the far side, they would speak. They walked. They met. And she spoke first. "Ah, what a fine young man." He answered her. "Ah, what a fine young woman." And then he said the line this whole episode turns on. It was not good that the woman spoke first. They went ahead anyway. and the child that came was not one they could keep. The Kojiki calls it Hiruko, the leech child. It does not tell us what was wrong with it. It tells us they put it in a boat woven out of reeds and pushed it out into the sea. The next was no better. An island they called Awashima, the faint island. They did not count that one among their children either. So the two of them climbed back up to heaven and asked why. The elder gods answered with a divination. An old one, traditionally understood as heating a deer's shoulder blade in a fire and reading the cracks that ran through it. And the answer was the same sentence he had already said on the island. The woman spoke first. That is the reason. Go down and say it again, in the other order. They came down. They walked around the pillar again. This time he spoke first, and she answered him. And the country started to arrive. The first island they bore was Awaji, the small one lying in the water where the mainland and Shikoku almost touch. Then an island with 4 faces, 4 provinces on one body, Shikoku. Then a set of triplets out in the northern sea, the Oki Islands. Then another island with 4 faces of its own, in the south and west, Kyushu. Then Iki, a single island. Then Tsushima. Then Sado. And last, the largest of them, under a name that means Great Yamato, the island of rich autumn, Honshu. 8 islands, which is why, in the oldest Japanese, this country has a name that means nothing more than the 8 great islands. Now count what is not on that list. Hokkaido is not there. Okinawa is not there. What this list maps looks like the world the 8th century court imagined for itself, not the borders of the country that exists now. The creation of the world stops exactly where the world of the people writing it stopped. And some scholars read the order itself as a sea route. Awaji, the inland sea. Kyushu, then the islands facing the continent. The gods gave birth to the country in the direction the ships actually went. They kept going. 6 more islands, smaller ones. Then they stopped making land and started making gods. The wind, the rivers and the sea, the mountains, the fields and the moors. A country needs weather before it can need people. And then she gave birth to fire. His name was Kagutsuchi. He was flame with a face on it, and being born out of a body meant burning the body he came out of. The Kojiki does not soften this. It says exactly where she was burned, and it says she took to her bed, and she kept giving birth while she was dying. Metal came out of her, then clay, then water, then the young god of things that grow. Metal, clay, water, growth. A forge, a wall, a well, a field. The last gods she made were the tools for going on without her. Then she died. She was the first thing in the world that ever did. They carried her up a mountain on the old border of Izumo and buried her there. Izanagi lay down at her head and then at her feet and wept. And where his tears fell at the foot of a tree, another goddess was born out of them. Even his crying made a god. That is the kind of world this is. Then he stood up. He drew the sword he carried, and he killed the child. And the killing made more gods. From the blood on the blade came gods of rock and thunder and water. From the fire god's body came 8 gods of the mountains, and the sword itself was given a name. In this book, nothing is ever only destroyed. The Kojiki gives Izanagi one line over his wife's body, and it is the plainest sentence in the whole chronicle. It is not a speech, it is a question. My beloved wife, have I traded you for a single child? And then he went after her. He was not supposed to be able to. She was dead. There is no road. He went anyway, and we will follow him down there later in this series. 3 things about this story you only get from inside Japan. First, the child they pushed out to sea. In the Kojiki, the leech child goes into a reed boat and is never mentioned again. That is the whole of it. But from the medieval period onward, people did something with him. That rejected child came to be identified with Ebisu, the laughing god with a fishing rod and a sea bream under his arm, one of the 7 gods of fortune. He is on shop curtains. He is on a beer label you can buy today. The Kojiki says none of that. People did. The child nobody could keep became the god you pray to for a good catch. Second, the woman who spoke first. It is fair to read that line as the ugliest thing in the book, and plenty of readers do. But look at what the text does with it. The man announces the rule. Then heaven confirms it by cracking a bone in a fire. In the world of 712, the order of who speaks in a ceremony is the ceremony, and the divination outranks anybody's opinion. Then notice what the same chronicle does a few chapters later. It puts a goddess in charge of heaven and gives her the sun. This book is not consistent about women. It is consistent about ritual order. Third, the makers of the world have 2 addresses. The Kojiki says Izanagi is enshrined at Taga, inland beside the Great Lake. The Nihon Shoki, finished 8 years later, says he built himself a hidden palace on Awaji, the first island of all, and stayed there. Neither book says he died. There is a shrine at each place, and each one keeps its own claim. And Onogoro itself was never located. A rock off Awaji, a handful of other candidates, no way to settle it. The oldest ground in Japan is a place you can visit, in several different places. Next time, we leave the gods completely. There is a picture almost everyone has seen without knowing what it is. A skeleton the size of a temple, coming down through a broken roof. The giant made out of the unburied dead, and the truth about how old that monster actually is. If you want these stories the way Japan tells them, subscribe.